November of 1860. An uneasy city awaits a newly elected president, and in the still unfinished dome of the Capitol, some see a sign of the times, unfinished, Union itself. It is a bustling time, a thriving country, but the president-elect himself has called this America a house divided. Other voices speak even more ominously. We live in the midst of strong agitations, and we are surrounded by very considerable dangers to our institutions and government. For 31 million Americans, a turning point has come. All across the country now, eyes turn toward the American heartland, toward the president-elect. Many are asking, what do we know of him but that he was born in the wilds of Kentucky and reared in the wilds of Indiana and Illinois? His campaign song had gone, "Old Abe Lincoln came out of the wilderness, down in Illinois." The rail splitter candidate, the campaigners called him, the backwoodsman. But who is this Lincoln? You must travel to a place called Springfield to find out. They know him there. In his own words, as a strange, friendless, uneducated, penniless boy. But here he grew and developed at a time and place of great growth and development. Through a quarter century, they watched his rise, from self-taught lawyer to a force in state politics and trustee of his adopted town. Now the people have called him from Springfield to face a task which, as he tells his fellow townsmen, is greater than that which rested on George Washington. He has come a far journey from the log cabin of his backwoods birth to this comfortable home, the home of a successful provincial lawyer and politician. But for America, the question persists. Is he more than that? Is there something deeper? There is. As a state legislator and congressman, as a searching, probing student of democracy and its workings, he slowly, quietly ripened and deepened through the years. When great national issues challenged him, he was ready. His great debates with the little giant, Senator Stephen A. Douglas, in 1858, set the prairies on fire and spread his name across the country. Listeners felt something elemental and mystical in his speeches of unyielding hostility to the spread of slavery into the new territories of the West. As the prophetic man of the present, the new Republican Party made him its presidential candidate. Now, as president-elect, his position remains unchanged. On the question of extending slavery, I am inflexible. Where the peculiar institution already exists, Abraham Lincoln intends no interference by the government. He favors toleration by necessity. But in the South, his election seems a menace to the very survival of an agrarian society based on the labor of some 3 million slaves, to a system long sanctioned by custom and the Constitution. And the South remembers another Lincoln saying and deeply distrusts him for it. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. Long ago, the prediction was made, "Sir, slavery will not be overthrown without excitement, a most tremendous excitement." So it proves. All through the South, the tremor runs, the convulsion of a once serene society that feels itself threatened with extinction. In Charleston, South Carolina, in December of 1860, the fabric of the Union, long strained in the violent tug-of-war between North and South, is torn asunder. In Institute Hall, where men shout, "Resistance to Lincoln is obedience to God," an ordinance of secession declares South Carolina a separate and independent state. The following February, even before Lincoln can be inaugurated, 6 other states join the movement. In Montgomery, Alabama, the Confederate States of America are founded. Their president, the former Secretary of War, Jefferson Davis of Mississippi. Abraham Lincoln, aged 52, 16th American president, bearded now and somber on this somber inauguration day, March the 4th, 1861. Almost his opening words are a reassurance to the South that he intends no action against its property, peace, and security. And as he pleads for calmness and forbearance, he stresses two of his deepest convictions. He says, "I hold that the union of these states is perpetual." And he asks, why should there not be a patient confidence in the ultimate justice of the people? Is there any better or equal hope in the world? In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of civil war. The government will not assail you. You can have no conflict without being yourselves the aggressors. You have no oath registered in heaven to destroy the government, while I shall have the most solemn one to preserve, protect, and defend it. But now a crisis quickly looms that no eloquence can soothe or diminish. Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, symbol to the north of the federal authority that must be maintained if the flag is not to become the hiss and scoff of the world. For the South, Sumter is a symbol of domination by a foreign power, an intolerable affront to the sovereignty of an independent state. The North will not withdraw, the South acts. April 13th, 1861, Fort Sumter surrenders. A reporter writes, "The curtain has fallen on Act One of the great tragedy of the age." A young Northerner who speaks for thousands north and south exalts the greatness of the crisis. The Homeric grandeur of the contest surrounds and elevates us all. So the Civil War begins, with high-flown rhetoric, with picture book poses. So large an army as the government now has on foot, says Abraham Lincoln, was never known before, without a soldier in it, but has taken his place there of his own free choice. But for months after Fort Sumter, there is no major fighting. War seems an agreeable routine. An Illinois recruit writes home, "I never enjoyed anything in the world as I do this life." The people think there is a royal road to peace, says Abraham Lincoln. They have no idea that the war is to be carried out and put through by hard, tough fighting that will hurt somebody. And in the South, a general named Nathan Bedford Forrest says, war means fighting, and fighting means killing. this great trouble, Lincoln calls it. And mounting defeat, mounting casualties wring from him a despairing, my God, what will the country say? Now begins his long search for a general to match the military genius who is leading the South to victory after victory over the numerically superior North. A general to match Robert Edward Lee of Virginia, called the grandest figure on any field. And second only to Lee in dash and brilliance is his strong right arm, General Stonewall Jackson. It is called the Army of the Potomac, says Lincoln, but it is only McClellan's bodyguard. General-in-Chief George McClellan has organized a powerful striking force, but hesitates to strike. He falters, waits, says the president, he has got the slows. Delay is ruining us. McClellan cavalierly brushes aside the president's counsel, but Lincoln is patient. I will hold McClellan's horse if he will only bring us success. But instead of successes, the new military telegraph clicks out heavier casualties, more retreat. Black bulletins pour into the War Department in Washington, where Abraham Lincoln reads the dispatches and broods upon their larger meanings. The struggle of today, he says, is not altogether for today. It is for a vast future also. To Lincoln, the enduring union of a free people in this free expanding land is the last best hope of earth. The whole war is attesting whether his countrymen shall nobly save or meanly lose this last best hope, democracy's future. The dogmas of the quiet past, he says, are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country. And he rises with the occasion by giving the war a higher significance, a deeper purpose. In midsummer of 1862, he presents to his cabinet the draft of an Emancipation Proclamation. He will strengthen the cause of the Union by freeing the slaves. But, the cabinet cautions, the proclamation can have little force or effect if issued amid continuing Union disaster. And then it comes, a Union victory, one of the bloodiest days of the war, when Lee's advance into Maryland is checked at the Battle of Antietam with appalling casualties on both sides. Now the first phase of emancipation can be proclaimed to the world as an act of justice warranted by the Constitution upon military necessity. In giving freedom to the slave, says Abraham Lincoln, we assure freedom to the free, honorable alike in what we give and what we preserve. For him, the Emancipation Proclamation is the central act of my administration and the great event of the 19th century. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. As the war goes on, the battle hymn of the Republic sings of it as a crusade, a noble mission. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free. But Lincoln's thoughts are with the soldiers, the men of Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville, of Vicksburg and Gettysburg, when he says, this war of ours, in its magnitude and duration, is one of the most terrible. It has carried mourning into almost every home until it can almost be said that the heavens are hung in black. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, on November 19, 1863. A cemetery is being dedicated, a burial ground for 6,000 soldiers north and south who fell here last July. Parades and speeches now, where once the Union line broke Pickett's charge. For 2 hours, the crowds are spellbound by the classic oratory of the greatest speaker of his day, Edward Everett, diplomat and scholar. The president's speech is secondary. He has been asked to make only a few appropriate remarks. But in his words, the meaning of Gettysburg, of the war itself, is caught for all time. that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The speech evokes little interest. Lincoln thinks it a failure. In the privacy of a White House sometimes threatened by Confederate capture, a wearied president must find what relief he can. His chief delight is his little Tad, whom he habitually pampers and spoils. But, says Lincoln, his brother Bob was just such a little rascal, and now he is a very decent boy. The First Lady, Mary Todd Lincoln, an adoring wife, but emotionally unstable, overly fond of extravagance and display. She shines at White House balls and levees where the president is awkward and uncomfortable. He much prefers to meet people informally to learn what they think and say. But midway in 1864, the political talk is that Lincoln cannot be reelected. The war drags on, the casualties multiply. Who is to blame? The president. Says Lincoln, if there is a worse place than hell, I am in it. With the South still undefeated, the North itself falls prey to rampant disloyalty and violent dissension, as in the savage New York draft riots of the year before. Bitter political antagonisms well up, and Abraham Lincoln is vilified and mocked in the press as no other president has ever been. They call him clown and fiend, a laughing stock, the Illinois beast. But the people are not misled. As Lincoln says, truth is generally the best vindication against slander, and the people keep their faith in him. The soldiers win him timely victories. The election vindicates him. I am a slow walker, but I never walk back. And now at last the pace quickens toward the goal he so deeply yearns for, peace and union. Now he has not only the troops, but he has found the man to lead them, Ulysses S. Grant, who conquered Vicksburg and split the Confederacy. I can't spare this man, says Lincoln. He fights. And so does William Tecumseh Sherman, who says, war is cruelty, and you cannot refine it. After more than 3 years of civil war, Lincoln is able to tell the country, we are not exhausted, we are gaining strength. The factories of the industrial North send mounting masses of new weapons to the fronts, while the Confederacy, blockaded, bled white of men and supplies, fights on nerve alone. No longer can the rapier of Robert Lee fend off the battering ram of Grant and Sherman from the citadels of the South. Atlanta, Savannah, Charleston, Richmond itself. Says Robert Lee, it is well that war is so terrible, or we should become too fond of it. With 500,000 dead North and South, America at last has its fill of war. Palm Sunday, the great stillness comes at Appomattox in Virginia. After 4 years of unequal struggle, the South surrenders. The arms are stacked. And a Union general, Joshua Chamberlain of the 20th Maine, remembering, pays tribute to the soldiers of the Confederacy. Before us, in proud humiliation, stood the embodiment of manhood. Men whom neither toils nor sufferings, nor the fact of death, nor disaster, nor hopelessness could bend from their resolve. Standing before us now, thin, worn, and famished, but erect, with eyes looking level into ours, waking memories that bound us together as no other bond. Was not such manhood to be welcomed back into a union so tested and assured? How could we help falling on our knees, all of us together, and praying God to pity and forgive us all. April 14th, Good Friday. All Washington basks in victory's afterglow, and the president shares the mood this day. We're going to have good times now in the United Country, he tells a White House visitor. Now his one wish is to bind up the nation's wounds with malice toward none, with charity for all. In late afternoon, he and Mary go for a carriage ride through the city, and he speaks cheerfully of their future. A trip to Europe, perhaps, when his term is over, and then quiet years again in Springfield. But now, today, with the great trouble past, I never felt so happy, he says. This evening, he and Mary are going to the theater, Ford's Theater. It has been in the papers that the president will attend. The whole town knows it. And so does an actor named John Wilkes Booth. Feverishly romantic, insanely vain, he has appointed himself avenging angel for the defeat and enlisted a band of conspirators, deserters, mental defectives, thugs, in a plot against the government. The leading role he has reserved for himself. Tonight, he will assassinate the president. The president is disinclined to attend the theater this evening, but he has promised his wife, and he does not wish to disappoint the people. It is the kind of engagement I never break, he says. Ever thus to tyrants, shouts the assassin as he flees. A doctor from the audience examines the president's wound. It is mortal, he says. He cannot recover. 6 soldiers carry him unconscious into the night, across 10th Street, to a boarding house where the nearest empty bed can receive him. In the house of strangers, at the end of a strange corridor, Abraham Lincoln finds the end of his road. Now all that has ever been said against him recedes and fades, and men begin to remember the other words. The greatest sign and marvel of our day, a plain man of the people, called to conduct the passage of a great people through a crisis involving the destinies of the whole world. That has been said of him. He was heaven's instrument to conduct his people through a Red Sea of blood to a Canaan of peace and freedom. That has been said of him. Once during the war, when he was urged to rest, to ease his burden, he had answered, "The tired part of me is inside and out of reach." Now his rest will be long. "7 on the morning of April 15th, 1865. Now he belongs to the ages.